What good is what goodness? It's just like another day, another day. What good? What good?
Procura descobrir a própria cor Hey guys, if you could start to move into the seats. Wow, I didn't realize I was so loud. That'd be awesome. We're gonna get started in about 10, 15 minutes.
Hi, everyone. Can we all start making our way to our seats? We're going to be starting in about a minute. Please, thank you.
Now the hand, they told us if we played with fire, that we surely get burned. We ignored the warning, and now it's gotten out of hand. They told us if we played with fire, that we surely get burned.
Hi, everybody. Hello, hi. Can we please make our way to the seats, please? Thank you. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Amanda. I lead the community efforts here at Consensys Canada. Thank you all for coming to our Block 3 meetup, and thank you to Rangle for hosting our event. So, to give a little background, yeah, it's clap. So to give a little background, our first block, Block 0, actually started back in January, and we were at U of T, and we only had about 50 of us, and now we're at Block 3, and we have close to 100 attendees here today. So thank you, everyone, for all your help and support in coming out to our meetups. So for tonight, our theme is identity on the blockchain. We have Michael Sena here. He leads the product lead at uPort, came all the way from Brooklyn to be here with us and to speak. So thank you, Michael, for coming all this way just for this meetup. Yay! And then we also have Andrew here, one of our senior developers. He's going to be giving us a technical walkthrough of how to integrate uPort and also introducing the RSVP platform. And then we'll end off the night with a fireside chat between Michael and Russell Verbeeten. So to give a quick update on our meetups, you may or may not have known, but we have introduced a community validator role to our meetups. So Alex will talk a little bit more about that, but this role is for someone who will respond to a query or bounty request, and kind of as a reward, we will want you to come here at our BlockTO meetups to speak about your experience on responding on these requests. Another update that I have is that, we're exploring a new launch and blockchain project. So if you guys are interested in doing something like that, please talk to Jofo. You can email him and there'll be more. Oh, he's right over there. We'll have more talk about this at our post-event survey. Also, for bounty requests, we also want to know what kind of requests you guys want to see. So that's also going to be out on the post-event survey. So definitely be on the lookout for that because we want to hear what you guys think about all of it. And last but not least, we also are hiring. So we have our talent partner here, Shashi, who is somewhere here, over there. So if you have any questions in terms of our hiring needs and our job openings, please feel free to talk to him after the meetup. And now I want to give the floor to Rangle. So we have Anam. She is one of the events manager, and she has a couple of words that she wants to say.
Hi, everyone. My name's Anna Rubeck, and I'm the events manager here at Rangle. This is an amazing crowd. We are actually bringing out more chairs for you guys because it looks like a full crowd. For those of you who don't know what Rangle does, we're essentially a technology firm, and we do end-to-end application development, and we're always excited and happy to support the tech community, so happy to have you guys here. If you want to know more about Rangle, you can just find us over there at our little tiny booth, and we'll tell you more. Thanks.
I think that's my cue to actually start talking. Hey, I'm Alex. I work at Consensys as a full stack blockchain developer. Is that what we call ourselves now? Okay, cool. Awesome. I'm here to talk about, well, I'm going to MC first of all, and I'm also going to talk about the community validator role. Hopefully my link is open. Cool. So the community validator role is it's 5 minutes we're dedicating to the next block to like give people some time to talk about something they're working on or something they're doing in the blockchain space. Not really time to talk about your startup. I'm sure it's very cool, but maybe we can talk about that after the meetup. So going forward, if you guys have like are building something on the blockchain or are doing stuff like filling out some documentation on Calorie, then you can come here and talk about it with us, and it would be awesome. We'd really love you to do that. We're going to send out a survey after the meetup, and hopefully you guys can fill that out and let us know what you want to hear about and anything you're doing, share anything you're doing with us. So I'm going to talk about Calorie for a minute, which I already clicked on a link by accident. So if you don't know what Calorie is, it's a way of excuse me, putting up a bounty to get people to fill out some documentation for you or like solve a problem for you. So here's a few examples of bounties on Calorie. It's how to use uPort in a voting application. So you can write the documentation, build a small proof of concept, submit it here. If it gets accepted, you get to accept the bounty of $17 or 0.04 ETH. Yeah, we're gonna up that. I think we gotta up that. That's our bad. We'll make it like what, $18. So yeah, hopefully you guys are into doing stuff on the blockchain and sharing it with us because that would mean a lot to us. So first up, we have Michael Sena. He comes to us all the way from Brooklyn. He's the co-founder and head of product at uPort. He's focused on building protocols and usability solutions, which is really awesome. He actually does know a lot about UX and the blockchain, which is a really cool thing to talk to him about later. Sorry, I know now you're going to be here all night. You might miss your flight. Oh, it's okay. Okay, we're good. All right, we're good. Yeah, he's leading uPort. He previously to working at Consensys, he was doing technology and design consulting at Jump Associates. He was a global macroeconomics analyst, which is a mouthful, at Barclays Capital. He holds a degree in political economics from Princeton University, where he focused on game theory, governance, and comparative international politics. I don't normally need notes, but that was like a lot of stuff. So he's a really cool guy, and here he is to talk to you about uPort.
Cool. I have slides, but I don't know if they're open. Hi, I'm Michael. We're just trying to get this set up.
This is it? Oh, there we go. Whoops, there you go.
That's me. Cool. So it's a little hard to see. It was more clear on my computer, but it's okay. There aren't very many words on there. I'd rather just talk to you. So I have 20 minutes, and I was told that our time is precious, so I'll keep it to 20 minutes, I promise. Identity on the blockchain is a really interesting topic, not only because it seems so foundational and it's so critical to everyone's applications, and everyone says, well, the first problem that we need to solve if we're trying to build something is how do we manage users? It's also interesting because no one really can articulate what that means. Like, people know that they want identity, and they say. Some people actually mean KYC. Some people mean identity verification in a separate context. Some people just mean credentials, and some people mean signatures. And so identity is one of those words that means a lot of different things to a lot of people. And so I'll share what our current best thinking is on identity and how the two main products that we've built to date sort of address our opinion on how this goes. So Mirage is the title of this talk. And the main point and one critical thing that we've learned over the last 2 years of building uPort is that there really is no notion of identity. It's actually a construct that we've created, and it's an illusion. And so what does that mean for a blockchain identity platform that started out its life 2 years ago by creating a single contract that represents who you are forever? And that's what we said is like, identity is this single thing on the blockchain, and that is you. And you'll spend your entire life collecting data around this thing. And in doing so, you'll make it really valuable. And so you'll never want to lose it. And so then the objective is always, let's protect the private key that controls that thing. And that's the whole objective of identity. And that's not untrue, but there are many problems and things we've learned about that critical assumption of one identity for one user. And so really when it comes down to it, we've learned that identity isn't one particular thing for one person. Instead, identity can be defined as the data generated from our relationships. It actually kind of inverts the notion of identity. It says the thing that's important isn't the address or the identifier. It's kind of like the thing that's important is the things you do and say to others and the data specifically for those relationships. So for example, if I use CryptoKitties, like a common dApp, I have a relationship with CryptoKitties. And I browse their page, I click on certain cats, I don't buy them, I click on other cats, I do buy them. All of this data is specific to me and CryptoKitties. And they have this data, they know this about me, and this is their perception of who I am. If I go to another app and I interact with Gnosis or Augur, and I do similar things, I browse their pages, I click on markets, I bet on some, I sell others, that's an identity, and the collection of that data is also an identity. And so how do you maintain privacy if everything is public on the blockchain? And so I think the critical question for us to start solving now with these identity systems is how do you maintain integrity and how do you maintain user control in a world where it's all about maintaining this vast amounts of data generated from these interactions online. And so at uPort, what we're trying to do here in solving this problem is really creating a trustworthy, flexible, inclusive solution that empowers people to control these relationships. And we picked those words like all very deliberately for many reasons. I think like flexibility is key for us. If developers, especially in the blockchain ecosystem, can't just like pick up one single component and it's useful to them, then it's probably not going to be adopted. So I think like we learned about how you go from trying to create a platform in like the Web 2 world to trying to create a platform in the Web 3 world, and how like the differences those two problems actually like face and how they're different. And so we obviously sought to be inclusive because if we're creating this single sort of unified identity layer, then we can't like exclude people with Android phones. We can't exclude people with no smartphones. And so like you need to diversify the endpoints that can access the network. You need to sort of standardize the protocols under and sort of make it easy to use. And if it's not easy to use, then people lose control. And so there's really this like this core, I don't know, this core trade-off that we've always sought in designing an identity product, and that's like trade-off between usability and privacy. And it's kind of like an adage in blockchain, but particularly in identity, because identity is the core of these relationships that you need to manage. And so there's been like people have a lot of questions like, how can I use uPort? Like everyone says they want to use it, but with so many different definitions of identity, like practically what does this mean? And how does it make my life easier? And so I apologize, I didn't make these slides nice and pretty. But the sort of first product that we created is just this integrated system. And when people think of uPort, this is largely what they think of. This is the integrated self-sovereign identity system where my identity and my private keys and my private data is stored locally on a mobile phone. And that's where I manage my secrets and passwords, basically. There are developer libraries that let users log into applications with uPort. I think you'll see a demo later of all this functionality, and this is sort of like what you'll be demoed, because this is mainly what we've been building for the last 2 years. And what this does is it gives users control. So because it's a smartphone and because it's not on the server, the secrets are safe with the user. And so basically you have like a little identity database that's running as a smartphone application where apps can like send data to, store it with the user like goes away, signs out, comes back weeks later, and the app can like re-request that data back from the user. And so it changes the paradigm of needing to store user data like on Amazon or on the blockchain, which like one is centralized and one is public forever, and it gives you like another place to put it. And so that's in the user's control. and so is defined to be self-sovereign. Below, the two main libraries we use to do that are uPort Connect and JS. uPort Connect is like the library that will turn your web app into a uPort client, and it relies on JS. And some of the use cases that like you hear about uPort are in this area. So like digital credentials management, which the first popular use case we heard of in that was government identity in Zug, Switzerland. And so quickly the way that that worked is like a user would arrive at, would basically get an email or get a flyer in the mail from the Zug government saying like, hey, you're eligible to receive a digital certificate of citizenship or something. The user goes to the site, fills out some information about themselves, like their citizenship number, their address, their name, etc. Signs that application with their uPort ID. It gets, they get a confirmation email that schedules their appointment to show up in person at the Zug city clerk's office for in-person verification. And so they show up, they show their ID, the city clerk matches their face with them, and they verify them in person and manually or physically approves them, and then the uPort system issues a digital certificate to their app that says like citizen of Zug. And they're using that to like vote on real things, and it's in production for a year. And so citizens are using that to vote on opening times for like swimming pools or like things at the kids' schools, kind of like benign use cases now, because we don't advise them doing like mission critical things on them yet, because they should walk before they run. But it easily could extend into those systems. So like they built something in that was like testable, that was like easy to deploy, yet can scale into a production system. They really don't have to make any changes. They did build some UI components for like the city clerk issuing some of these certificates, but largely it was out of the box. And what you can also do on the mobile phone is it can sign messages. And so that message can be like a piece of data that says like, I don't know, Russell was here at my talk, and I can like click it, sign it, and send it to Russell, and I can give him that credential. But I can also like sign an Ethereum transaction, and I can send that to an Ethereum blockchain. And it can be a private chain, it can be the Rangle.io testnet, and it can be mainnet. And so what this power is, by putting that signing capability in users' hands, is like, now I can use any Ethereum app on any network, and I never have to worry about like managing the account that I'm signed in with in MetaMask or anything like that, because the request comes into my mobile phone, which handles my keys to all of those networks. And so my mobile phone can actually interpret that request and see where it's coming from. We use something called like MNIDs and multi-network identifiers to be able to tell which network a request is coming from. And so we make that all disappear for the user. And so like that's one way that we help with usability, is like we don't make users worry about which network or anything they're interacting with. Like they can just click OK and it sends the message. Okay, I have like 10 more minutes, I think. Good. The second product we're working on is, and this is newer, it's kind of always worked behind the scenes on the uPort integrated identity system, but we're pulling it out into a separate product and a separate library now. It's called UserSpace, and what it does is it is a way to store data off-chain with users instead of on your own servers or the blockchain. It enables data to be privately shared between dApps for a richer Web3. So you can essentially think of V1 of it as like shared local storage for dApps. So like right now, MyCrypto just came out with a new address book, or like a contact list. So you can basically like add addresses and add names or add tags to them in some way. And what they do is they take that data, those key values, whatever, and they store them in local storage in your browser. You can use them on MyCrypto, you can't use them anywhere else. And so like, you're going through all that effort, and if every app follows this pattern, you're gonna have to duplicate that across every app. The way that you can enable this type of user-generated data to be shared is either like stored on a server, which I don't think MyCrypto wants to do, or they could store it in a user space instead of in local storage in the browser. And so it's sort of just a dev library that application developers can request. And when they request a user's user space, they're just requesting a personal sign signature, which is an Ethereum Web3 standard now. So you're not adding any additional functionality. So like a user personal signs gives that application access to their data storage, and that application can write and read from it. And then if they do that to another application, they can give that same thing. And so eventually what you're doing is creating a pool of off-chain data that's controlled by the user, yet accessible and shared between apps. Forms the basis of a data marketplace. And essentially, this is like, to us, like as I said in the beginning, it's not about the identifier, it's more about the data and how do you manage consent and control of that data throughout the life cycle of a user. And this is really our approach to that in an Ethereum compatible way, because like we heard from developers, like uPort is rich and powerful, but like what if I just want one function of it? Or like what is an easy way that uPort can work with MetaMask? Or what's an easy way that uPort works with Toshi or Cypher or any other wallet? And like this is our answer to that. And so this will let you have, for example, like dApp cookies. Yeah. Question. Sorry, what was that? We're ready for questions. Okay, I will. I have like 2 more minutes left. Thanks. And so a use case would be like shared dApp cookies. So you go to one site, you go to like CryptoKitties in your browser, and you use MetaMask, and CryptoKitties can store like your history or your state management or other types of cookie information about you in your user space, and then you go to Toshi, and Toshi is also hooked up to the same user space, and so your experience of CryptoKitties and Toshi is exactly the same as it was in the browser, where right now that's not possible because there's no way to share that information between Web3 providers. Again, shared contact lists and public profiles shouldn't come as a surprise. Additionally, like 2 of the core protocol things we work on and built first were, one was a claims registry. That's like a way to store public claims information about an identity on the blockchain. There is one ERC 780 contract deployed on each main network called the uPort registry. You can use that. You can also deploy your own. The second thing is ERC 1056, which is a lightweight identity protocol. Lets you turn any Ethereum address into a decentralized identifier with no initialization cost. So basically like in a scalable way. Yeah. And so those are sort of the 2 foundational things that we built that you can use, deploy any way you want. And yeah, that's it for me. Thanks.
We got like 6 minutes for questions. You cool with that?
Yeah.
We're talking on a fireside later anyway, but
Yeah.
any questions? I know we got one back there.
I want to thank you for that. That was one of the most informative keynotes. But it's a really smart topic, and I deal with biometrics and multi-factor authentication and cryptography. And what you touched on is layering the biometric identifier and understanding where people are in real time, and allowing for them to gain access to a secure, authenticated protocol. And in the future of authentication and verification in the biometric world, I think it's very fascinating that you touched point on something like you did today, because very few banks, very few of the authentication providers are providing biometric identifiers. And in your opinion, how does real-time RFID, point of sale, biometric identifiers that are non-static, retinal scans, face scans, thumb scans that are static, that can be cut and paste on a server or lying on, the device itself, how can we as a society protect the identity of our clients by using multi-factor biometrics in real time with what you just had to push through in your speech, sir?
Yeah, I can't wait for that world. Yeah, that is like
Not asking the easy questions.
yeah, it's like just
Real-time dynamic enrollment, not static scan, bitmap, JPEG that's coming
yeah.
stored on a device. It's a live video feed that says yes, no, you are. You are, in fact, in real time, in the location, based on GPS and RFID devices that prove that you are, in fact, where you are and who you say you are in real time.
Yeah, I think it's going to be important, and authentication and authorization are super critical. I think one thing is user space will need to start supporting streaming data from all these different sources to like be able to manage that in a secure way, and you'll probably need a lot of local compute power to sort of manage the behavioral biometric authentication in the local key signatures required to do that.
Does that eliminate the tokenizing?
Uh,
If you can authenticate somebody biometrically, does that eliminate secured key and tokenizers?
No, they're sort of, because I don't think so. I mean, biometric identifiers, it's all about proving the data is you in some way, and that's one way to do it. Sort of like, streaming data and stuff.
Basically, if you don't tokenize it, then you don't have the private key, right? If you're going to store it on the blockchain, it's going to be public. They need something to unlock. And
Yeah.
you cannot just unlock it with your fingerprint, because anyone can steal your fingerprint and still unlock it.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll have some time to chat later. Hold that thought. We'll have some time later. I just want to make sure we get a couple more questions in.
Hey, great talk, Michael.
Thank you.
So I have a question around device identity. So you mentioned earlier that our identity is defined by our relationships, but our relationships are becoming increasingly less so with people, but more with devices today.
Yes.
So if I have like a slew of autonomous cars and a tractor company an agriculture company with like several sensors, and I want to manage all of that, is there any device identity solution that you are also planning for uPort?
Good question, and a fair one. Yeah, I think machine to machines are going to be way more important than human to human. So there are a couple of ways. Like at a base level, like the identity protocol ERC 1056 can be used to support any form of identity. Like it's a common structure that you can use to represent an entity. It could be a human, it could be a car, it could be a sensor. So like technically I want to say yes, but like practically, I think we're still a bit of ways off, at least on uPort, from doing anything as it relates to IoT, not because we don't have interest, but because we're just focused initially on like providing identity for people in Web3 as like a mandate, because if we don't solve that, then like we're probably not going to solve the other thing. But not that it's not important, and I think there's like a lot of work that other companies are doing, particularly in IoT, and so I think it's about making sure that the core design decisions of these protocols, if they are different, are interoperable, such as like the data credentials and signature verifications and that type of thing.
I think we got time for one more, so we'll give you this last one.
Thank you. Great presentation, by the way. One question. So there are a lot of identity-focused initiatives that are happening in the market today, right? How do you see, I would think at some level, a lot of them are trying to fulfill a utility purpose that can be used across all the various D apps that will be formed. How do you see that space evolving? Is it, speed to develop and kind of be able to scale and productionize something, or is it just trying to solve different aspects of the identity problem? Like, how do you see that space evolving?
Yeah, great question. There's so many people like in the identity space now. I forget the person who does the study, but they built the framework and they map all the companies to it, and like it exploded in the last few years, so it's a bit confusing. To me, I think there will be foundational like things that are shared between identity providers that will emerge as standards. I don't know where they will come from. I don't know. I have opinions on where I think that will happen. Like we've been working as uPort and Consensys along with Microsoft and Blockstack and Sovereign and others building the Decentralized Identity Foundation, which builds like standards for DIDs and standards for verifiable credentials along with W3C and some of this other work to make sure that like you should be able to fire your identity provider. Like uPort doesn't aim to lock you in, like Sovereign should never lock you in, like Blockstack should never lock you in. And so as long as the data in the hubs is serializable and can be moved and the identity providers can be swapped because they speak the same language, then like it's about use case implementations and go-to-market strategy after that point. Like, are you gonna launch a protocol and build a business around building a venture fund and just seeding projects using your tech and hopefully some of them take off? Are you gonna try and build like a mobile consumer wallet and a browser and like try to get everyone's value in there? Like, what's your approach? And I think above the protocol level, it's opinion, and I think those strategies will emerge, like, because there are so many of them. But I think at the core, like, we should be aiming to, the market isn't like the network isn't like uPort. It's not even Ethereum. It's like decentralized identities. And that's like a network that crosses any blockchain or decentralized network on which a DID is registered. So it's actually like a much bigger network than any single blockchain.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mike.
Cool.
Michael, pardon.
It's all good. Thank you.
So next up, we have Andrew D'Amelio. He's a senior blockchain developer at Consensys. He works with me on RSVP with me. Previous to Consensys, he was at Universe, a Ticketmaster company, working on third-party JavaScript stuff with me. We don't do much apart, so, you know, he's my friend in life and code, and he's here to talk to you about integrating with uPort and being embarrassed by me.
Thanks, Alex. Hello. Yes, this is me. I guess before I get into it, just a quick poll. How many people here are developers? Wow, wow. How many people are DApp developers? Whatever you think that means. Wow. And how many people have used uPort, either integrating it into an app or just using it as a user? Perfect. Okay, so my talk today, I'm going to be talking about integrating uPort. All that wicked identity stuff we just saw, what does it look like when we actually bolt it onto an app? I've had some pretty good experiences with this. Before I do that, Alex already introduced me. This slide's not necessary, but I guess it's fitting that we're here at Rangle. That's where I started my career in web dev, so just shout out to all the Wranglers in-house, and ex-Wranglers too. I know there's a few of them. But after I left Rangle, I did some work around at Ticketmaster and Universe in the event space. And since then, I've moved into Consensys. And that's me. So what do I do at Consensys? I'm working on a platform called RSVP. And this is in its very early stages. This is a prototype we're experimenting with. And the idea behind RSVP is we were kind of tackling an issue we saw in the community around our meetups. So we were noticing that we'd get, we have these meetups, these Ethereum-specific meetups, workshops, and we'd get great interest, high number of RSVPs. But when it actually came to the event, small amount of people would show up. And I get it, commitment is hard. But it's kind of not the greatest, especially when the demand is there, and like we could fill the room. There's people that are just passionate and want to learn. So we experimented around kind of coming at this with crypto kind of economics. So if you want to get a ticket for one of our meetups, the idea would be you would stake some Ether, not a lot, a small amount, $5-10, and that effectively holds your place. And when you show up at the event and you get checked in, that is going to be refunded to your wallet. So it's just being temporarily hold and stake to hope that you show up. If you can't make it, something comes up, it's going to incentivize you as somebody who has some money floating out there to maybe cancel that RSVP so somebody else can take it. That's kind of where it started. A cool little hook we built into this though that I really like is kind of like this idea of donations. So, if somebody's, we're staking a bunch of money for an event, it's not a lot of money, but we get a good turnout. People very easily have the option in their checkout of their ticket to kind of, give some of that stake back to the meetup. So they can donate it for, pizza, beer, anything. And this could be, some great benefits for smaller meetups that are just getting off the ground and could use a little extra support by their, their meetup family. That's one aspect of it. We also, it's also a bit of a community meetup app. So we've been thinking a lot about gamification and just playing with kind of the habits that people would have, like their identity in these meetups at these workshops. So we love the idea of kind of giving badges to users. So you come to a meetup, you get a little collectible that says you were there. Sure, you can trade it. Maybe it will be worth a Lambo one day. I mean, they're just ERC 721s. It's not going to be worth anything. But they're fun, and it's a kind of a cool little keepsake. If you go to all 12 of our meetups in a year, you might unlock a secret badge. If you speak at a meetup, you might unlock a secret badge. If you do the community validation stuff, that might unlock a secret badge. And these can be traded, they're collectibles, they're just meant to have fun with. But the cool thing about these badges is when you start to, incorporate them a little bit with uPort, for example. These badges, we can attest on our platform that, user whoever actually went to this workshop. They went to these 3 meetups. And we can provide this information to the people to the people handling the registration desk. So, you've been to a few meetups, I might give you a fancier shirt. I can see that. Or you might even be able to take that attestation that you have in your uPort client that says you've done this Solidity workshop to another platform that might want to kind of utilize that information to prove that you've done some due diligence on the next level of that workshop. So just like fun ideas around that we've been experimenting with. Same with kind of the skills cloud over there. Again, this is all very prototypey. That's why it's so beautiful. But this kind of skill cloud is the same idea. Like, I could request RSP. Think of this kind of like your LinkedIn skills, except it's not people like, hey friend, like endorse me for like, space. These are being automatically attributed to you based off of the workshops you're doing on the platform, based off of the meetups you're going to, and kind of the skills associated maybe with them. And these can be used, if there's particular workshops that require a little bit of prerequisite knowledge, this could be leveraged to help us figure that out. But ideally, like a user could ask the platform to bolt these onto my identity because I'm proud of them and I want every platform that I outside of RSVP to know that they could request this if they're aware of it and get that information. The attestation to this with the badges and the skill sets is a little bit more complicated of an integration journey than, for example, our login flow. So that's kind of what we're going to talk today about, is how we used uPort to integrate login and registration. And on our platform, we started with MetaMask, and then we also very quickly adopted uPort for the obvious reasons. And we kind of use both side to side right now. And I just want to kind of walk through what both of these kind of look like. So I guess right before I go into that, just because I think it's worth just mentioning for anybody here who's never worked on a DApp before, you can see on the big chart on the left there, we effectively are looking at your traditional servers, traditional like development stack. You got your web browser, you got your JavaScript, CSS layer, your client side. You still got your server code, your caches, your databases, your API. You're familiar with this. The smaller little architectural chart right there is what you're looking at is like kind of your DApp. You got your DApp browser, which can be your regular Chrome browser with MetaMask on it. You've turned it into a DApp browser. You need that Web3 though to actually interface RPC-wise with the Ethereum blockchain, actually interact with the smart contracts, use it like you would a traditional API. So when I'm talking about DApps, I'm talking about RSVP. I'm very much talking about an application that's using both Web 2 and Web 3 architecture, not just Web 3 architecture. We still put things into our databases. We still have a server. It's just where it makes sense to use the blockchain, we do. And for RSVP, stake and tickets, attestations around badges and skill sets, and login. And it's the login slice that I found really interesting when I actually sat down with my colleagues to work on this platform, just how easy it was to throw that convoluted login registry process that I had done countless times in traditional web apps. To do it on the DApp stack was a lot of fun. So this is what currently our login flow looks like for MetaMask. I want to show MetaMask alongside uPort just so you can see a bit of a contrast, but they are very similar. You'd hit your login page. You'd connect with MetaMask. If you don't know what MetaMask is, this is a Chrome extension. It effectively throws the Web3.js library into every page you visit so you can interact with the smart contracts from anything on that client-side page that wants to invoke smart contract interactions. And it's handy since it's a wallet. It's also injecting that wallet into the browser too. So by using MetaMask, you have your Web3 provider, you have a user that has a wallet, they're ready to have some fun. So they would connect. we would, at this point, have the user sign a message with their MetaMask client. This is how we need to do this in order to prove that they actually own this wallet address, that they've come to this website representing. By them signing a message that our server provides them, it's just login right now, but this will actually be a lot more secure. But they will sign a message and send the hash back to the server, and we will validate to make sure that their MetaMask account is actually an account they own. Once that happens, we will log them in, and they're pretty much logged in under the username of their wallet address. Of course, they can alias that to a nickname if they want, but effectively on our platform, there is no username and passwords. It's just your public Ethereum address is your account, and your password is just your proof of ownership of that address. Okay, so the uPort flow, very, very similar. You're going to come in, you're going to connect with uPort. It's going to throw up this window in which you're going to, as a user, you're going to go and download the app, the client, uPort client. If you don't have it, if you do, you're just going to continue on with this process. You're going to scan this QR code with your uPort client, which effectively is going to log you on. In which case, on the device, you're going to see a notification pop up. It's going to be a login request. It's going to tell you which app, which uPort app is making this request. What I really love about this too is you're also seeing exactly what the app is asking in terms of your identity information. In this case, it's asking for the user's email address and avatar. And this makes sense. We want an avatar. We want to customize the look and feel of the site a bit, and we want the email address because we might need to email them. There's a lot of reasons we would want this information. But just like on your Android phone when you install an app, it's very, very clear to the user what this website is using from their account. And of course, as a uPort user, I have to agree to this. If I do and I click continue, I'm logged in as uPort, effectively very similar to MetaMask, with my wallet address being my account. Now, there are some differences with this flow, and I just want to call this out real quick. We log on with MetaMask, we make that signature, and then we confirm the signature. This is something we have to do on our server. We have to create the message that the client's going to sign. We have to have the client return it back to us, and we have to make sure that the hash of that signature, against the message that we sent, will derive to the public key that this user is trying to represent as theirs. If that works and it's theirs, at this point they're effectively, in our mind, the owner of that address. We're now going to go into our database and look to find this user. If this user doesn't exist, we'll redirect them to a register page. We're going to collect email address, we're going to collect an avatar image, and we're going to save it. Not too nuts, pretty similar to what you would do now in a regular app. If they already do have an account, we're just going to pull it out of our database and retrieve it and send it back to the client in order to hydrate the state. Great. But this is better. I really love this flow. So with our uPort users, they sign in, they log in to uPort, and that's it. I mean, we get the proof. They get the proof of wallet just by logging in through, they're pushing that off to uPort. And we get this extra benefit of their profile information coming also directly from uPort. So in this case, when we ask the user to sign in, we're asking for their email, we're asking for their avatar. So once they're logged in, the client side is ready to go. There's no need for us to even make a call to the server. There's no profile data we need to get. It's already there, and it's already hydrated our state. It's really nice. You might be thinking, well, this is a single sign-on, big deal. This has been around forever. Yeah, maybe. I mean, that's decentralized. uPort, it's a little bit more not. But at the same time, I love the idea that that the identity moves with it from platform to platform. This is. By just interfacing with uPort, you've opened yourself up to potential future interoperability with other platforms, potentially with other protocols. So, I mean, if you're going to go out and create a DApp, be my guest, use either of these products. They're both great, and I love them both. But just know, with uPort, you're getting that little bit of extra identity. The thing that is really good, You are getting, though, that Ethereum wallet in both cases, the ability to sign transactions, interact with smart contracts. So they're both great ways to go, but you can definitely prototype an app a lot quicker. If you're just looking to rapidly prototype an idea in the blockchain space, uPort, it's probably a really good way to go about it. You know, it's just, back with the uPort, like we were looking at, there's no server code I needed to write. Maybe you'll get to a point as the app grows and matures, you will have to store some relational database with those users. It won't be PII, but it'll be something. But at least at the start, where you're just trying to prototype an idea, it's just easy. You can just move quickly. And again, like, it's less PII in your database to worry about. Like, you will sleep easier at night knowing you don't have, you know, all these like unhashed passwords and email addresses and birth dates and all that you have to worry about. It just goes away. So what does this actually look like when you go to implement this? Well, if you're interested, I recommend the developer docs. They're great. Awesome. Good place to start. We're mainly going to be, I mostly have worked with the uPort Connect library. This is what allows us to connect to uPort on the client side. You kind of got to start out by creating a uPort app. You just start in App Manager. That Health Canada, that's just me playing around. There's no affiliation with Consensys. So you create an app here. You have to use uPort. You have to sign this. This is going to kick off the creation of that application on the uPort end. And it's a transaction, so you got to approve it on your client, and you got to wait for it to get mined. It'll get mined. It'll happen. And when it does, you're going to get to this screen. You're going to be able to put in a title for your app, an avatar. You're going to have access to the address, as well as some more secret private information, like your private key for that ownership that you need to retain, obviously. But it's also just going to give you all the code you need to get this up and running, which is really great. It's just literally copy and paste in this. So you can dump this, a little npm install uPort Connect, and then you're ready to go. So to instantiate this, again, this code is just copy and pasted right from the app manager, but effectively all you're doing is passing into this connect function the name of your DApp, your client ID, which you got from the other site, the network that your app's going to be, you want the uPort to be connected to interact with your app, as well as your signing key. In terms of the actual implementation of the login, though, it's really just call and request credentials, pass in the requested fields. In this case, I want the name, phone, and email address. The notification flag is just going to allow you any interactions from this uPort connection later on. If the user needs to sign a transaction or whatever, they're going to get push notifications to their phone. It's just a really nice UX hook. And if for whatever reason that request fails or they eject out of it, this promise will reject and you can handle it. Otherwise, it's going to resolve. And effectively at that point, they're logged in. They've been approved at that address. And you're going to get a payload of credentials, which has everything that you asked for. So I got a quick demo of what this looks like. Let's see. So no need.
Doing it live.
So this is, I have this hosted. It's cotton-fine.glitchme. So you can pull this up, you can fork it, you can play with it at own. If this is your introduction to DApp development, just playing off this and remixing this, that would be super cool. So what does this do? So we're going to connect with uPort. We hit connect. It opens up the connect to uPort window. We say we're ready. I open up uPort on my client. On my phone. And then I just need to scan that QR code. And then once it's scanned, I get a notification on my phone. It's asking me for some information, and I'm going to approve it. So now that it's approved, you'll see that the state immediately updates with my profile information that I requested. And I promise you, there's nothing really going on here based on what we just looked at. We're doing a little bit of setup. And then in terms of that login state and managing the credentials, I'm just requesting that info and doing something with the payload. In this case, I'm in a really weird, non-reacty way, just stamping it into the DOM. So yeah, that works. Oops. So yes, DApps can be scary. I know. The big takeaway from this conversation I hope you get is that you're not afraid to experiment with this stuff. uPort is a beautiful example of that. Even if you have an app, you can't think of like a DApp idea. You can't think of something like, well, this would make sense on the blockchain. Like, who cares? Like, just take your centralized whatever and create like a little slice of it that is uPort login. And now you have that Web3 provider. You have that wallet address. You have a really nice stepping stone to maybe create some type of blockchain aspect to your site now. But at least you can get your feet wet in a very safe way, and at the end of the day, it's not too bad. You just implemented single sign-on. But it's cool, it's uPort. Nobody knows maybe what it is in the centralized world, but they might look into it. But I mean, the idea is that there's so many good tools. Like, there's just the development tools in the DApp space are amazing. Everything's really, really polished. You should feel pretty good to just pick up each of these tools independently and just play with them. Yeah, just go out and build. And as Alex mentioned, we have, if you've been inspired, you want to create something with uPort. If you want to make $18,
It changed?
make a vote-in application, completely using uPort. It'd be really cool, and it could be votes for anything in your office, like what's the lunch going to be on Wednesday? Create a little DApp that people would download, use the uPort to kind of give that vote. We'll up that, but this would be a really cool project to work on to kind of experiment with it. And if even if you fail, even if you try, let us know, talk about your experience, fill out this Kari post, get a Medium post up there, and just experiment. Thanks.
Thanks, Andy. Do we have questions? Oh, man. I think we have time for one or two questions. All right, one question.
Hi, just a newbie question. If I use the MetaMask or the uPort to log in, does it cost any gas?
Sorry, does it
Cost any gas?
Cost any gas? No, none at all.
Not at all.
You're good. But again, if you're just experimenting in this space, utilize utilize your local change, utilize your testnet. There's free testnet faucets out there. It's really easy to get a hold of test ether. Don't let Ethereum main chain activity get in the way of you just wanting to build stuff and pioneer in this space.
I got time for extra questions.
Identity sounds like a application of the non-fungible token, the ERC 721. Is there any overlap between the ERC 721 with the other ERC 1056?
I don't think so.
There's no overlapping
Over.
two, but uPort could support any 721 implementation of an identity token.
Okay.
It's just a different model.
And one more.
So maybe this was covered in the uPort presentation. Maybe I missed out. But what if I lose my phone and?
Oh, sorry. What if you lose your phone?
What if I lose my phone? Is there a way to recover?
That's a great question.
I'm
actually not sure.
Okay.
What would happen, Michael?
Oh, you got one?
I have it. I was told to talk until it lights up. Hello? Yeah, it's working. Sorry, the question was around...
Losing your phone, would you lose your identity pieces?
So there's two pieces to that. So your identity is both your private key and the data associated with that key. And so you can back up your private key today with a seed, like you do in MetaMask. We also, if it's not in, should be in soon, social recovery, where you can just assign a couple contacts. You back up your account with that. We used to implement social recovery as a smart contract, like a multi-sig, but we since moved away from that because privacy, you would need to store the addresses of your delegates on-chain if you do social recovery on-chain, and so you could become a target, or your recovery network could become a target. So we took that off-chain using Samir secret sharing now, and we back up your data in our hub, and you can always retrieve that.
That's awesome. I mean, even if it wasn't, I would still probably prefer just putting all my information into a new phone versus having my information spread in all these weird collective ways across all these centralized services in different ways. I've updated my email, but 6 different platforms still don't realize it.
You said that you're backing up the data in your hub. So isn't that centralization of some sorts again?
Not really. So it's a hub that someone operates. So there is someone operating the hub. However, we wouldn't have access to the data in the hub because it would be symmetrically encrypted by the client. And the data is also redundant on the user's phone. So the only time at which case it would be centralized would be in the interim between when a user lost their device, which means like we would need to go try and rob someone and take their device and then wipe them from the server. So it's like a step in the direction just making it redundant locally and in the cloud. And as we move towards like redundancy in the cloud, then we can even remove the client. Sure, yeah, it's as secure as the symmetric encryption. But if that breaks, then we have a lot of other problems with blockchain.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome. So yeah, we'll leave that there so we can get started with the fireside chat. Next up, we have a chat between Michael Sena and Russell Verbeeten. I could introduce Russell, but he gets introduced at every single block meetup. He's the managing director of Consensys Canada. It's kind of the reason I'm here. Pretty awesome. I've known him for a long time. Do you want me to say anything else? Hair looks nice today. I don't know.
Thanks, Alex. No, that was great. Thank you. Your hair looks great too.
Yeah. Okay. So after these two are done talking, I'll run the mic around for questions. Make sure you're talking to the mic for questions because I think this is being live streamed, and I totally forgot until this moment in time.
All right. Well, a big hand of applause for Mike's presentation and for Andrew's. That was awesome. Mike, thanks for coming up from New York. It's great to have you in Toronto. You had some trouble on the tarmac, is that right? They kept you there for a few hours?
yeah, a few, but this is worth it now.
Yeah.
Especially getting to see you again.
It's always too few moments, Mike. So I guess we'll start off kind of light, and then I've got a somewhat technical question, which I think will be interesting to the audience. But really, we'll open it up to the audience for more questions because I think there was a lot of unanswered hands. So just a few from me, Mike. So bear with me. And I'll start off with a question around what you would want to see uPort be used for. I'm wearing the Bounty Networks T-shirt. It's one of my favorite dApps in the space, and we're obviously trying to use it here in our community efforts in Toronto because it's a way to get the community involved in building these systems together. They are open systems, and Bounties is one way that we can get people to start getting involved. Cowrie, for those of you who don't know, is built on top of the Bounties network, and it's one type of bounty that's out there. But we'd love to see lots of more bounties, and maybe there's one we haven't thought of yet for uPort. So do you have like a great app that you've always want to see people try out with uPort, but you haven't seen built yet?
Yeah, of course, decentralized Facebook. I mean, like in all seriousness, like I think never before in the history of tech has an identity solution been adopted because it's an identity solution. Like it's always been because it lets me connect with friends, or because it lets me email people, or PayPal lets me send money. And so like I think we need to be thinking about a lot more seriously about these use cases, and not like, I think we're almost at the point now where we can start to think real about these things. Like we've been playing around for a long time, and I know like Blockstack has had a fund. I think they put aside like $1 million or something to invest in an early stage project, or a few of them building decentralized social networks. But I think the model of identity that we use on uPort just lends itself really well. So like if you have Facebook, but your identity data were credentials, and your feed and your friend requests were requests sent to your hub, and like you could log into privacy book with the same data, and like it wouldn't have to be like you wouldn't be locked into anything. So like it would be really cool if with GDPR and stuff, like I could go to Facebook, like download all my data, and then like go to privacy book and like upload all that data, and it'd be better. And I think you can build that.
That's super cool. Privacy book. That's a good name. I mean, it's interesting, right? Like, what type of business models emerge? What type of interchangeable kind of AIs could we use to generate our own news feeds, right? As opposed to the ones that Facebook's generating for us. You just kind of mindlessly click and scroll through. Maybe there's a better view of my social life online that I'm not seeing. And it kind of gets back to some of the questions that were being asked. I think, Akash, you had a question about standards, and it brought to mind kind of the position we are in today. It's like this balkanized identity landscape online, right? You got Facebook, you've got Google, you've got a couple other identity.
uPort.
You've got uPort, but it's not owning and controlling your data. It's a different scenario. And kind of the point that you were bringing up was that there are these efforts around standardization that's really making it interoperable, putting the user in control, but also allowing you to take your identity that you may have created using uPort's tool and in theory take it to a totally different system that might be centralized, as Andrew was saying, or could be a different blockchain, perhaps, other than Ethereum. And so you mentioned the Decentralized Identity Foundation. Obviously, you showed us some EIPs that were existing. I know there's a few others as well in the ecosystem. And so it seems like a lot of good work is getting done. And my question to you is, on a technical level, like architecturally speaking, what do you think is the most unsolved issue in terms of realizing those identity standards? What's the obstacle that could prevent this interoperable identity, self-sovereign identity future from materializing?
That's a good question. You asked for a technical answer, and I feel like I want to give you a non-technical answer.
Give me the answer that whatever answer.
I think
occurs,
like regulation or like movement by an incumbent into like a version of the space that isn't really self-sovereign or that isn't really user controlled. Like, I think
like a Google.
Yeah, like in order for these new models of identity to like actually become real, there's infrastructure around them. Like that's why identity is so complex, because it's not like you can just plug in a new platform and it works. Like if you're, in the most regulated extreme use case that like everyone loves to talk about, but that's probably a far way away, is like, oh, a bank A, investment bank A or consumer bank A KYCs me and issues me a credential. I go to bank B and I use it and they save $150 a year for not having to check me, and bank A turns a cost center into a revenue driver. It's like clear business model, except like that doesn't work yet, because like how can bank B is still legally responsible for like doing that verification, and just because there's a cryptographic piece of data that says it was done by someone else doesn't mean like it absolves me of my legal responsibility. And so like I think regulation and things like insurance for claims and things like insurance for credentials are probably going to emerge as like critical pieces to this, because like you can do things with data and you can give it to the user. I think technically one of the most challenging things though would be an authentication protocol. Like what does the data authorization and granular permissioning system look like that lives in these agents? But like that's probably not even the hardest thing. The hardest thing is probably like more behavioral and social.
It's interesting. So it's like I don't actually care that maybe it's Mike. I can't remember what you were going to do. You were going to sign something to me earlier, but it's actually that I have an insurance contract associated with that signature that I can rely on if things break down.
Yeah, because like people need to blame someone, and just because like the blockchain makes it transparent doesn't mean like courts don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like in the beginning there was the DAO. It was like, is code law? Like that was the whole thing. And I think it's like, no, like we don't live in a blockchain world. Blockchain lives in our world for now. And so like for now, we have to like, live as society does.
Super cool. So we could talk all night, Mike. When are you going home?
6 a.m.
Okay, perfect. So let's open up to the audience. I think there's a ton of questions out there. I think Alex got the mic, so maybe start with Paul.
Cool. Yeah, when you're asking questions, make sure you like talking to the mic.
I recently came across the term blockchain singularity, like a point in time when all blockchains can communicate across all blockchains. Some of those examples of people trying to do this are POA.network, Cosmos, Aeon, and for the Neo side, Ontology. So I'm interested, I want to see how we can move, I've seen people moving ERC20 tokens, or just tokens in general, across from blockchain to blockchain. I'm wondering if how that's going to affect identity as well, because I want to be able to move my identity from Ethereum networks maybe to a proof of authority network that my company runs, or something like that.
That's a great question. So yeah, there are a ton of those, and even like side chains or however sharding will work in the future. Basically, like there are different environments, and some of them may be similar, like Ethereum-like environments, and some may be completely new environments, like Cosmos or something like that. And I think there's a couple things that need to happen to enable identity in the blockchain singularity. It's like, one, let's put, like, if we need to register identities or revoke identities, let's put them on a place where all chains or networks can resolve against, which seems hard because there's probably no one single place that all networks can communicate with, or else that's centralized. And another option could be creating like global namespacing and DNS registrars that map across networks, so you can look locally to your registrar and points you to another network, and you have some system of gateways and pointers and things that like allow you to resolve identifiers from other networks across networks. And so there are some supporting microservices that requires today. You could do it. That's sort of like essentially you can also do better key management on the client side. So like when a user's signing in, you're using the right keys, and it's about proving that even if if my data was addressed to 1234 and on this network 6789, I need to be able to sign a mutual proof that proves to you that I can control both identifiers even though I'm only showing you data from one. And so there's sort of like a system of management on the client side that needs to happen to like prove that this data is the same across networks, and you need probably a system of public registrars to enable cross-network resolution.
So keep your hands up. I got one question right here, but I'll come to you guys next.
So speaking of blockchain singularity, recently in Toronto, Identity North just happened. Huge conference on digital identity, right? So there are a shit ton of identity solutions out there. We all know, probably upwards to over 1,000, maybe more. What is uPort's plan for, like, or is there for integrating with all those other ones that exist? And I guess another question is, or a second parter is, what is the big, hairy, audacious goal of uPort? If you've heard that phrase before, BHAG.
Sure. Yeah, I have. So, yeah, I mean, our plan, and sorry, besides the big hairy goal, the first question was on which part again? How we integrate?
Just staying integrated with all
identity
the
providers.
hundreds of identity apps and different services that are coming online.
Yeah, it would be really challenging if we tried to keep up, but I think it's about focusing. So there are a couple things that we really care about, and that to us are like first principles, like this is how the ecosystem has to be built, or else like it puts into question the entire mission, right? Like there are certain things that have to occur, and it's probably like some standardization of identification or identifiers, like some common protocols for identity. It's about like making and if if like identity platforms are built on top of protocols, then we can define interoperability standards. Like, but if it's kind of when platforms go rogue, or if platforms like really centralize in certain ways, that like we don't try to integrate with them, because we believe that the efforts we're putting forth and like done by us in DIF and others in similar standards organizations, and like the mass of people working are sort of doing it to solve these reasons. So like we don't have to worry about integrating with 1,000 new identity providers. It's like, well, they all speak ERC 721, I think like someone said, or they all speak 1056, or like, you know, it's easy to define an interoperability standard between 721 and 1056. Like, that's sort of the goal, to make it easier and rely on standards to help us do that.
Awesome.
So existing identity platforms sustain themselves by making money off user data. How is uPort planning to sustain itself and make money?
That's a great question. And the big hairy goal too, and it's kind of related, because so our goal is to deliver the mission of enabling users to control their relationships, like very broadly. And to us, that looks like creating products or solutions along the way to that mission without knowing what the end point will be. Like, I don't think any of us can sit here today and say, like, this is how the industry will look, because, like, we tried to take that, we wrote down what we thought 2 years ago, and, like, we were so wrong. And so, like, we're not going to try and do that again. But what we will do is be a part of the Ethereum ecosystem, and we are lucky enough to, unlike some of our competitors, like, not be forced to make that trade-off yet. I think, like, we don't have to monetize because we have the support of an institution like Consensys that that we are aligned mission-wise with, and who will support us on this journey. I think, like, Sovereign, like, and Evernym, like, nothing against them, they have a great product. Like, from an identity theory and concept standpoint, like, we're very aligned with them, but they have to make a trade-off, or they're about to, because they have to make money. They have to sustain themselves. They're like 60 people. And when you're scaling, because identity is not like one product, it's like a suite of things, you need large teams to do that. And you can do that through, like, payment of contractors or staffing yourself, but, like, work has to get done. And so they're thinking about a token, or they announced a token. And we've been working with them for a year trying to convince them, like, you might not want to do the token yet, because it might not make our platforms interoperable, because you have a token on a different network and we have a token on Ethereum, if we ever do. And, like, what if that doesn't work? And so we're not in a place that we're saying we're trying to make money, but we do understand the benefit of sustainability. Right now we have that through Consensys, which we're lucky and, like, in a very positive position because of. Big hairy goals, I think he asked, but yeah, to control data and relationships in whatever way that means. I don't think we know what that looks like, but a world where that is true is a world that we all want to live in. So we're excited to build that.
What does that future look like when the user's in control of their data and their relationships? What's my day to day? What's it gonna be like?
It's like, man, I don't know. Maybe it's like those commercials, like where you have pain medicine or something, and you can, like, take a bath outside, and it's like a peaceful landscape, and it's like you're smiling, and you have a dog running or something. I don't know. It's probably you probably, like, make money, and people say, like, well, what's my browsing history worth? I could tell you it's, like, worth $12 a year, and do I really want to go through this for $12 a year? And it's like, if collecting your browsing history was all you're able to monetize. But, like, if you think very concretely, it's like one use case. You do a 23andMe or genetic test, you store that JSON of the results in your hub, and a medical, like, drug testing company comes along, and just on your mobile phone sitting here, you get, like, a beep, and it says, like, an offer for your 23andMe test, and it's like $50, and you just say yes. And that consent UI gives you control over your data. It's very unobtrusive in your daily life, and, like, sitting here, you just, like, collect recurring revenue on something you've already done. And so, like, big platforms and big marketplaces have been built by letting people make money, and so I think when that becomes really easy, life will be better, but a lot of things have to happen first.
So I tried to install, I was going to install WhatsApp, on my Android phone a couple of days ago, and it asked me for my contacts, all of them, and I wanted to take those. So apparently I could have taken all my contacts out, joined WhatsApp, and then put them back into my phone. That seems pretty hard. So what happens if WhatsApp asks uPort for your contacts and says, I won't actually let you onto WhatsApp unless you give me those? Is there a way to, and is it, do you guys think of like send fake contacts button? Like store a bunch that, or like I don't want to have to empty my uPort of all my contacts. I want to fulfill what they are asking for, but not give them what I don't want to give them.
That's an interesting question. I guess I see the point. I think the model, I'm like thinking through the answer. I think the model looks a little different. They today, I guess, would just due to it being on the same device be able to request your contacts. Here, because it would be abstracted to an extent, you would have like an algorithm or something that's working on your behalf, on your side, on your data. I don't think we can stop applications from like malicious behavior. I think ideas of what you're saying have existed before in Bitcoin wallets, like forget the term, but it's some feature where if someone's forcing you to open it, you type in like a secondary digit pin, and it shows you like a balance of like a very low Bitcoins if you're being robbed, or if the authorities are investigating you, they can't see your actual balance. So like that has been around, and there might be models that we build in for that type of advanced functionality. But I think now, I guess what I'm trying to say is like the market will in some ways decide, and if applications are very easy to build and those with malicious behavior, unless all adopt it, will be sort of the ones that are shunned for it. But there's no good answer. It's like, I think the market will act on in some way, and it's sort of hard to predict if people will completely move away from those, or if we'll have to, on the identity side, like build in features to protect users. And I think without experiencing that in the context of uPort, it's hard for me to say, but it's like a real problem. Like, how do you stop institutions from requesting extraneous information, right? Because that's ultimately what it is. Like, they don't need that information, but it does make their UX sticky.
It happens all the time on Android. They ask for stuff they don't need.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, how do you stop them from doing that?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's, can you?
You can always say no.
That's like, yeah, it's kind of like terms of service. Like, it's like, how do you pressure, like, does the market pressure, or does like, do you use, like, in some ways, I don't know where that's going to come from. I hope that we can all like work together and like, you know, delete Facebooks and like stop sharing information that we don't need to share with other people. But I think like we have to like get there, and it's probably not one of the first things that people will complain about. Now it's like dApps are just like, what is uPort? How do I even think about giving users a private key? And like, what? How do we do lifecycle management? Like, I think we're not there yet, but we will be once it's like at scale in some places.
Cool. I'm queuing up questions, so just keep your hands up. I got a couple people in the queue. But cool. Awesome.
So I think this reels in a question from before regarding incentive structures. In general, conventional businesses, it's agreed upon if you create value in this world, you're able to capture a bit of it for yourself. And uPort is creating a lot of value, and you agreed like you don't need to monetize it, that's okay. But if someone was to create a privacy book or something like that, right? We would need to think of ways to capture that value, or at least create some incentive structures for developers to build on it. And I know it's currently being thought on in the blockchain space, but what are some of ways that you think or you know exist or will exist in the future to capture that value and build incentive structures for developers to build?
Yeah, that's hard. Russell, you have any ideas? How do we capture value in business models in this new world? What have you seen besides tokens?
Tokens. It's just tokens. Well, I mean, I think the obvious answer, one obvious proposition would be a fee for this data hub service. I mean, it seems like encrypted data on some reliable infrastructure with some premium kind of features would be something I'd be willing to pay for. But do you think
that's good user research for me?
Well, I'm just one of many. But yeah, I don't know why. Is that like so like that case, like that gets decentralized too, and it's on IPFS, and so.
In some ways, you can, even if it's on IPFS, you can build into the protocol the ability for the identity provider to collect a small fee from the transaction of data. Like you can build that in.
And how much identity data can you actually put on IPFS right now? Like, you know, because if I'm going to encrypt my data and put it in IPFS, if it's sensitive data, I want it in a hub that's got a fence around it, because I want it to be like quantum safe. I want all those things as well. So probably can't be totally decentralized, right?
It depends on what you're storing in it. The sensitivity of some of that stuff. Like, you know, if someone knows your endpoint, it's like you still are subject to common encryption standards. Like it's still your best protection, and so you can do it decentralized also as a business model. Like you can symmetrically encrypt each individual piece of data and just distribute it on IPFS, and like you're, you know, discoverable, but you still have symmetric encryption, which isn't quantum resistant, but is like a lot better, and is like better than current standards. But I think like it's only one business model though. Like data is just one. Like I think tokens are obviously one that's being explored, and like I don't think we know where that will stop. Like we have someone on our team like doing some cool experimental research with like token bonding curves, and like how does that incentivize data sharing in a hub, and like all this stuff that actually use some like Ethereum crypto in new ways to pair that with off-chain data. Like Kevin Owaki from Consensys put an ERC out for subscription payments on the blockchain. There's like, you know, paper API use. You can, in data hubs, you can charge for, it depends on who pays, right? Like you can charge app devs for write and read. You can charge users for like hosting fees. You can, it just depends on who's benefiting the most in the market. And I think like business models will emerge once we begin to actually like hook up all the pipes and see where the value's flowing, because if you start taxing the wrong person too early, then you just choke off the network. So I think we're really letting the system itself emerge, because we don't know where it's going to go. But once it does, it will probably look something like microservices and providing like supporting infrastructure to a mostly open platform.
Also another model would be to charge enterprises. So for example, if uPort created a KYC ledger or a KYC app. So if uPort created like a KYC app, and then as a company or an enterprise, if I wanted to onboard a new user, instead of like going through the very expensive and time-consuming process of doing a background check and a KYC on my new employee, I can just use their uPort identity and their government identified attestations against my employee and see if it complies. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We can talk about that at 9 when we're all chatting. Okay. Got a couple more questions.
So we've all seen the web achieve leaps and bounds in recent years, specifically the mobile web. But this is due in large part to really big corporate interests like Google, Microsoft getting behind the W3C and giving them a swift kick in the pants. So I'm just kind of curious, when it comes to standards in the blockchain space, identity, tokens, subscription models, just so we don't die a death by 1,000, projects and protocols and interfaces and sort of, data layers thrown out. Do you think that we can actually achieve these kind of standards without actually just kind of stepping up and being the loudest voice or championing it from a centralized company?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Like, how do you build community, and how will this market evolve from standards? Like, I fear the same thing. Like, if you look at the EIPs now, it's like everyone's just throwing up EIPs for everything, and it's more about marketing and personal brand than it is about like actually believing it's a standard or like putting up a hardened standard. This is more like, hey, I have an idea. Do you think it should be a standard? And so I feel similarly that there's a lot of somewhat competing or like ego competition going on in that space, which I'm fearful of. But I think like Microsoft is behind some of these efforts. Like they have invested a lot of money in the Decentralized Identity Foundation that we as uPort and Blockstack and Sovereign all co-founded together to like band around some of these standards to be like a more practical W3C, to not be like a common standards group where you get into these long endless debates. Like we were trying to build stuff, like build reference implementations of hubs, like build like naming layers or sort of like building actual stuff and not just kind of arguing over whose standard should be right. Because in a large part, those standards, like you sit and chat about them until someone implements something that works, and then like others start to use that one. And so I think we're still waiting, and like there are front runners to what standards may be. Like it may be DID and DIF as like the identity standard. It may be something new. It may be someone just implementing something on Privacy Book that is a better identity protocol than we've all thought of, like, and we start using that. But I think the market that we're playing in is like decentralized identity, and so like I think our goal at least is just to get people to agree on something, or at least a set of things that we can work from. I hope it's the things we've been working on, but like until there's market traction, it's really hard to predict the standards because there's a lot of different ways they happen.
This Privacy Book sounds great.
Yeah, do you want to build it?
Yeah, let's build it.
I'll help.
You can apply for the bounty.
Replace Facebook.
So this is kind of a rookie question because, I mean, I'm only getting into blockchain. But the first question I had is with regards to uPort. Will you actually allow enterprises, like going back to your question, will you actually allow them to search the blockchain for someone's identity to verify that it's their person? So it would be like a search engine version of what you're giving as a service. And the second question I had, based on that, so it seems like right now the problem that we're having is if we take away a lot of like the Facebooks and all these other enterprises. So for example, if someone was looking up a possible candidate for a job, one of the couple of things that they'll do is they will look at them from a career perspective looking on LinkedIn, but then they'll also link them up on their Facebook. I mean, yes, it takes away from the person's ability to say, hey, I don't always drink, but it takes away that personal aspect of it. As uPort, what are you doing to cater to that personal aspect? And yeah, with regards to my first question.
Yeah, it's, I think like, so sorry, can you repeat just the beginning part so I can begin to frame the front?
So the first question is with regards to uPort identity. Will you allow enterprises or individuals to actually search someone's identity to verify them across blockchains? And the second one is with regards to the personal aspect of them with their identity.
Okay, yeah, so I guess the way that the system works is of an assumption of not knowing on the application side. So like an app doesn't know who's about to sign into it because they don't manage the identity database. So like I have an identity provided by some identity provider and I show up to a site and I just basically, they send the same message to every single person that shows up to their site. Like send us these pieces of data like you're shown, and then when the user returns it, it gets back to the app. And so you know, you could look at the blockchain as like a public database about identities if you knew the identity you wanted to look up. So like if you assume that you do have that, which is like a big assumption, like how'd you get it? How do you know who I am? Like, but you could still go look at the blockchain and learn a lot about someone. You can learn about their history of activities that they've taken across all smart contracts and across the entire network using that same address. So like every message they've signed that's been an Ethereum transaction and all these things can be learned and correlated across the network. So like you can see if the same person uses the same key to use Gnosis and Augur and vote in their government election, and Gnosis and Augur are illegal in the country that you live in, like they can see that on the blockchain. because everything is on chain and is permanent. You can also see public data in the ERC 780 smart contract that I talked about, that standard before. That's a public registry. So you can store key values in there basically, and they're publicly viewable. So it's called claims. Most are private. So like it's in our opinion that it's like rare or a specific case why you would want to store anything in ERC 780. What you do store though is like public metadata information that you do want to be discoverable about yourself. So part of the protocol is this called a DID document, and what that is basically just a JSON where you structure like public profile, like avatar, and you have a link to a URI or something. You have a name and maybe an about me, and you can just save that in IPFS and take the hash of that IPFS object and store that in ERC 780 about myself. So I say like, this is my public profile, and so others can resolve that. And so there are ways that you can build in public metadata and other data about me publicly on the blockchain, but like that should be me choosing to do it, or apps doing it in things like badges, or like, you know, is a user true, but probably not like your specific birth date or your age or anything like that.
Okay, we have a question over here.
This has been alluded to already, I think, and may have kind of been answered, but I guess with uPort and identity, are you supporting selective identity? So whereas if I have to go to a medical provider and I don't necessarily want them to have all of my medical information, they just need the MRI scan of my leg because a specialist is working on it. Or if I'm, you know, my daughter's trying to get into the club, they don't need her address, and they just need to know that she's over 21. So is that something that uPort it works in the API and supporting, or is that really outside of uPort's realm and that's just more blockchain smart contracts?
Yeah, so that's like squarely right in our wheelhouse. So what you're talking about, we've called selective disclosure, right? Selective identity, and in the demo you saw the request credentials, like included fields that you wanted to request from a user. So on what you didn't see is on the user's mobile app, it shows like, you know, name Michael, email michael@uport.me, and I can like unselect. And like right now that's not in the production app, it's in our internal test app. So right now it's an all or nothing rejection. So like I agree to the terms or I don't. But in the future, like in not the very far future, you'll have like required fields and optional fields. And so you can't unselect the required fields. It's probably like if you're trying to bank like your state issued ID, and that you can't unselect. If you want to not share that, then you just can't be our customer. And some other information that would be like nice of you to share with us, and maybe we can know more about you and give you a better credit, like have a better understanding of your credit worthiness. But you don't have to share that. It's to your own benefit, and it's only to your benefit if it's beneficial to you, right? So then it gives you the option of sharing potentially damaging information only if it's to your benefit.
We have about 8 minutes left for questions. Does that work for you? Like one or two? You cool with that, Michael? Yeah?
I'm cool with it.
Hi. I just had a question around privacy related issues. So if you knew someone's public key and you could search all of their transactions that they had made, you could, and your identity is basically the relationships that you have with other people. Potentially someone could make a lot of assumptions based on those relationships, and I'm particularly concerned about that people making very negative assumptions based on those relationships. Do you see any solutions or any opportunities to sort of like combat that in terms of I don't know, either technological or societal or policy, like legal solutions to that sort of question?
Yeah, fake data. It's a great question. So we're very worried about privacy, and to us, like, it's like non-negotiable. Privacy and control, the two together. And yeah, it's so relationship management is like, what I expressed uPort's core mission is, because it's so big and challenging. And like the more identities, if you reduce identity from like one thing to ephemeral relationships, which is in effect what we're doing, then you're saying it's not fewer keys we have to manage, it's more. And it's like more data and like it's more complexity on the back end. Just because it's more complex on the back end doesn't mean it needs to be more complex to the user though. And so like what we do is the relationships are never made public. They're never disclosed publicly on the blockchain. They're handled on the client side. And so if the client is handling the private keys and the signing of data, then the client can handle the correlation risk. The reason why we moved everything off-chain to the client was for that specific reason, because if you managed relationships between identifiers on-chain, you would therefore link all those identifiers on-chain and you would be correlated. And correlation risk, by the way, is not an easy problem. Like even with all these client-side key data management things, like you could still probably be correlated today. Like we're just not completely there, but it does like reduce the problem like, by factors. It makes it a lot harder.
Awesome. Okay, we have time for one more. Then we have the space till 10, and we can all hang out. You can bother Michael right face to face, see if he has any vocal cords left.
Hi, thanks, Michael. I was wondering, as part of your journey with uPort, has there been any scenarios where your development has been stunted by the growth of the platforms you're building on top of? Or have you been stretched in because you're building on this layer of different platforms, and they have their different philosophies, they have their different agendas? Has your team been stretched in ways that you regret, and what do you do in such scenarios?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Not a tech question, a team question. Yeah, it's hard. Like in where blockchain is right now, it's very hard to plan beyond like 6 months out, and we're finding that balance. Like we initially looked too far ahead. Like I said, we looked around and said, oh man, wouldn't it be cool if you could sign Ethereum transactions like you log into WhatsApp on the web? And that was where we started. It was like QR codes and a thing where you send a message to a phone, and like that was the platform. And then we were like, because nothing existed. And like first movers in new markets tend to do, we overbuilt. Like we had a system that was opinionated, but it worked, but for this way. And then as the market evolves and emerges and all these players like populate a space that solves specific problems that can move faster, you have to rethink. And I think like everyone that was early to this market, like Augur too, still doing the same thing. And so we're solving that now by making the platform more modular and solving it in the way we operate as a team, picking the problems we want to solve, like not trying to reinvent both the organization and the tech, like and society all at the same time. It's like pick a place and like focus. And so I think that's what user space is for us. Like we can, the integrated solution still works. Like you can get credentials on the phone, you can log in, you can do all these things. But like what is specific problems that we can solve that still take us in the direction of our vision? And I think like that shift is a lot deeper than technical. It's like cultural on the team, especially for visionaries that jumped into the space 2.5 years ago. So like that's where we are today. It's like it's a constant evolution, and it has to be. If it wasn't, then like there would be a lot more successful products, and yeah, it would be a lot easier. But I don't think that's why we're here.
What a deep question to finish on. Thank you so much, Michael and Russ, for having this chat. Thank you, Andrew, for doing the talk earlier. So I just have a few closing remarks. One, if you could all, like, Amanda, we need to take this photo. We want to take a group photo. Thank you guys so much for coming out. We really appreciate you guys being a part of the Block 2. No, it was me, Block 4. Sorry, it's Block 3. We're going on to Block 4. I cannot count. It doesn't mean I'm a bad programmer, I swear. So we're going to take a group photo. If you guys can just like squish together and like act like you're having fun, hopefully. And the other request is after the meetup, we're going to send out a survey. I know they suck, but if you hate my emceeing or really enjoy my emceeing, if you want me to keep this job, please fill it out and let them know, or don't, and tell them you don't want me here anymore. It's fine too. But let's take this photo.